Hello and welcome, my dear viewers, to yet another scary story for tonight. No true crime stories this time, I'm afraid. Instead, we will be delving down into the strange and mysterious tale that comes to us all the way from the land of the rising sun. So grab a drink, some snacks, sit down comfortably, and enjoy. The following story was found on Ni-chan, a Japanese anonymous message board, narrated and translated by yours truly, which means it may or may not be true. But that never stopped me from narrating it for your amusement, and I certainly don't see any reason not to share it with you right now. So here goes. To those who it may concern, this incident happened to me in the outskirts of the city named Kakegawa, Shizuoka Prefecture. This all took place around 7 years ago. When I was in high school, I was fascinated by all sorts of mysteries, especially the paranormal. I was thrilled to learn about a supposed haunted forest near my home city of Kakegawa. There was a dense, ancient forest nearby, just on the outskirts of town, and some friends at school who shared my interests had mentioned seeing ghostly apparitions and hearing eerie noises emanating from deep within these woods. Feeling like an amateur paranormal investigator, I decided to explore the forest one night. Naturally, I kept this plan a secret from everyone. It seemed like a brilliant idea at the time, sneaking out in the dead of night to investigate a haunted forest alone. Especially since I was a complete goody two-shoes schoolgirl at the time. Perhaps even overly so. I was super polite, meek and respectful to everyone who talked to me, bowed very often when talking to others, and used kudasai and gomenasai on almost every sentence, regardless if it was appropriate or not. Kudasai and gomenasai means please and I'm sorry in Japanese language, by the way. Perhaps maybe this is why it was super exciting to me to do something naughty for once. Especially with the slight danger that my mom would find out and lecture and punish me for it. My teenage mind at the time was convinced that if I discovered something really extraordinary, I would have an incredible story to share at school. I set off late on a Friday night, knowing my mom would be fast asleep and wouldn't notice my absence. The forest was about a mile from my house, and its entrance was marked by an old, creaky wooden gate. The forest itself was dense, with tall, ancient trees whose branches intertwined overhead, creating a canopy that blocked out the moonlight. As I walked deeper into the forest, I was glad to have the small flashlight that I took from my mom without asking her. It illuminated my path just enough for me not to walk outside of the road and head straight into a tree. Even so, I was barely able to see where I was going. The sound of civilization faded, replaced by the rustling of the leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. The path was narrow and winding, with roots and fallen branches making the trek more and more challenging. Despite the fear creeping up my spine, I pressed on, determined to uncover the truth behind this supposedly haunted forest. Halfway through my journey, the path forked. One direction led deeper into the heart of the forest, while the other seemed to circle around it. I chose the path leading deeper, thinking it would take me to the source of the ghostly sightings. As I walked, the air grew colder and the forest grew even darker. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, but I dismissed it as my imagination running wild. After walking for what I felt like hours, I reached a clearing. In the center stood an old abandoned cabin. It looked like it hadn't been inhabited for decades, with dirty glass windows and a sagging roof. Despite its dilapidated state, something about the cabin drew me in. I approached cautiously, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Just as I reached the door, I heard a noise inside the wooden shack. It was the sound of something heavy being dragged on the wooden floor, adult-like footsteps, a cursing, muttering, and a bumping sound. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned around and ran further away from the cabin. Panic surged through me, and I ducked behind a tree a few meters away from the cabin, hoping the figure hadn't seen or heard me. I could hear the sound of its movement, a mix of soft footsteps and something dragging. I held my breath, trying to make as little noise as possible. Soon the cabin door creaked, and a shadowy figure came out. I believed it was a woman, based on the silhouette and the clothes she was wearing. A black hoodie with white sleeves, a knee-length pleated grey skirt, dark knee-high socks, and standard loafers, the kind that schoolgirls, salarymen, and police officers would wear. She had very long and messy hair, so I couldn't get a good look at her face. She kicked the door to the cabin to close it, and after a few moments of more muttering and cursing, she grabbed hold of a bag that she was carrying and started dragging it along while walking further away. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Was this the ghost my friends had talked about? Better question, who was she? Where was she going? And what was inside the bag? My last question was sort of answered when a gust of wind blew to the direction where I was hiding. The sweet and rotten stench that came from the woman was simply glorious. I had to cover my mouth and my nose and stop breathing for a few seconds in order not to throw up. It was unmistakable. There was some dead meat inside that bag. It seemed like a heavy bag, heavy enough that the woman seemed unable to lift it up and carry it like a backpack. That's why she dragged it through the dirt road deeper into the forest, leaving a dirty trail behind. The figure moved past without noticing me, suddenly leaving the forest trail and heading deeper inside the shrubbery. I waited until it was far enough away before creeping out of my hiding spot. Instead of running home, I felt an inexplicable urge to follow it. I needed to know what it was and why it haunted this forest. After all, I came here to investigate any weird and possibly paranormal mysteries of this place. Not to mention once again my new and unfamiliar sensation of misbehaving and being naughty to my mom by sneaking out late at night instead of my normal goody two-shoes behavior spurred me to continue my late-night antics. and thus I kept a safe distance, moving stealthily through the trees. The figure led me to an old well, covered in the moss and surrounded by broken stones. It stopped and began to pull the chain from the old well, as if trying to retrieve something from the depths of it. I watched this strange woman, no longer scared, but now with a morbid fascination. Woman finally dragged out the bucket out of the old well, which was attached to the long chain that she was pulling. I mean, obviously, looking back, that is what was supposed to happen. She then opened the bag and poured its contents inside the bucket. It was dark, and I couldn't really see what exactly was poured from the bag. Obviously, I didn't have my flashlight turned on. There was the sound of something wet, yet solid hitting the bucket, and the horrid smell that made me gasp suggested that it was something rotten as well. After filling up the bucket with whatever was that she was carrying, the woman casually dropped the bucket inside the well. After a few hearty and nasty curses and her kicking the well a few times, the woman suddenly turned and started to walk in my direction. I was so terrified, like, oh my god! I can still remember my heart racing as I saw the shadowy silhouette of this lady coming towards me. She will definitely see me. I was merely hiding behind the tree, I remember thinking while I was scared and trembling. Luckily for me, the woman simply walked past. She didn't even stop or look at my direction. However, as she walked away from me, she uttered the most dreadful words that still haunt me to this day. I know you've been following me all this time, Akane-chan. I gasped in sheer terror. You can stop hiding behind that tree. It is foolish of you to think that I haven't noticed you. Rest assured that once I leave this forest and my phone has cellular service again, I will call your mother and inform her all about it. You can expect a good, long and hard scolding for your late-night antics, young lady. That'll teach you about sneaking out late at night and snooping in other people's business. I shrieked and started running through the forest desperately and as fast as I can in the general direction of my home. I wasn't sure who I was more terrified of, the creepy lady or my mom's lecture after returning home. I didn't stop running until I was back at the edge of the forest, gasping for my breath. I hurried home and slipped back into bed, my mind racing with what I had just seen. Over the next few days, I came down with a severe fever and missed school. The experience left me shaken, but also more curious. Was this paranormal? Or did I witness some lady trying to cover up a murder? Or perhaps this was just a waste product in that bag. But then, why dump the waste product in an old well in the middle of the forest and in the dead of night? More to the point, how did this lady knew my name? Who was she? To this day, I'm still seeking answers about that shadowy figure and the haunted forest. It's a mystery that continues to fuel my fascination with the unknown. By the way, my mom never received a call from that lady about my late-night forest antics. That is, she didn't need to. When I was running back home, scared half to death, I scraped and tore up my clothes pretty badly on various bushes, trees, and other forms of forest shrubbery. My mom found out about my antics on her own the very next morning. She then proceeded to lecture me about it very sternly for at least an hour or so. And of course my mom then announced my punishment for my late-night antics and for my ruined clothes. I was grounded for a week after that. No going out, no internet for a week, just school, cram school, come home, have dinner, then do chores, study, sleep, repeat. I remember crying rivers of tears and protesting that this was so unfair. And for my arguing, Mom extended my grounding punishment from 1 week to 2 weeks. Perhaps this was the most terrifying part of this whole story. As a teenager, you try to live for 2 weeks without the internet, social media like Bilibili or Instakilogram. I almost died from boredom.